Fans of Japanese games have been well served as of late, with titles such as Final Fantasy XV, The Last Guardian, Yakuza 0, Gravity Rush 2, Nioh, and Resident Evil 7, all being released in the last 3 months. But you can't have a celebration of Japanese gaming without Platinum Games, which is where Nier Automata comes in. Born from the mind of Yoko Taro, Nier Automata is a sequel to the original Nier, this time co-developed with Platinum Games. In creating Nier Automata, Platinum designed a new engine specifically designed to satisfy both the visuals and gameplay requirements. You see, Automata isn't your average game in this sense. While it could be considered a role-playing game at its core, the design combines a wide range of different genres into one incredibly bizarre but coherent whole. Within the first 30 minutes, the game seamlessly switches between an overhead vertical shooter, a twin-stick shooter, a 3D flight sequence, and a horizontal shooter, all before assuming control of your main character. Once on the ground then, the game smoothly jumps between third-person action, overhead segments, side-scrolling sections, and of course massive boss fights. All of this occurs before you even reach the open world or any of the game's role-playing elements. That the engine handles all of these transitions so smoothly is an impressive feat on its own. We're still early in the game, but it kinda feels like anything is possible here. A hacking minigame during a boss fight, anyone? Visually, the team has placed an emphasis on strong lighting coupled with a monochromatic color palette, though there are moments when splashes of color help shift the mood. Camera work plays a key role here in defining the experience, with dramatic and sudden shifts of perspective redefining your perspective on the world at any point. The engine smoothly jumps between different gameplay types and camera angles, leading to a genuinely fluid experience all around. On the surface, Automata doesn't really feel like a cutting-edge game necessarily, but there is a strong visual language here that results in some beautiful scenes. Elements such as the bold shadow maps slicing across the world, or the dramatic sun rays filling each scene with an atmospheric haze, really stand out. Texture work is sharp with fine details slathered across most surfaces. Animation work is also fluid and responsive, a key element in ensuring that combat feels great. And all of this is backed by an exceptional soundtrack which really sets the stage well. As a 2017 game, Nier Automata supports both the PS4 Pro and the base PS4. As in the demo then, the PS4 Pro version operates at 1920 by 1080 with reasonably effective anti-aliasing. The base PS4, however, is dropped to 1600 by 900 with little to no anti-aliasing at all. Take a look at the edges in this scene. The base PS4 exhibits noticeable stair-stepping artifacts along every edge here, while the PS4 Pro appears much smoother in comparison. Texture filtering is also enhanced here on the PS4 Pro, which improves the appearance of the sharp texture work. Beyond that, the Pro version also features per-object motion blur, which helps accentuate the animation work in a subtle but effective manner. The effect is absent on the standard PS4, just as it was in the demo. But then we come to performance. As with most Platinum titles, Automata targets a full 60 frames per second and manages to reach that on both platforms at regular intervals, which is exactly what we're seeing here on the PS4 Pro. Now, if we jump into a side-by-side comparison in this early area, we see the fluidity you'd expect on both consoles. The frame rate holds right at the 60 FPS line with little troubles. But as the action begins to heat up, the base PS4 begins to struggle to maintain 60 frames per second. This side-scrolling section combines a high enemy count with lots of particle and alpha effects, which drops the frame rate in the process. If we jump ahead a little bit here, you'll see instances where the level of performance on base PS4 falls well below 60 frames per second and remains there for extended periods of time. This area around the lava pits seems to present a problem for the system, as does this battle here. I'm using the dual wield system we have here, by the way, but mistakenly swapped the button configuration at some point, hence why the attacks here are completely different. Now, these slowdowns aren't always related to the on-screen action, with many of these otherwise quiet moments exhibiting noticeable performance problems on the base system. This outdoor area here at the end of the first mission really struggles on the system for some reason, with a persistent level of performance that sits well below the target 60 frames per second. Now, on average, you've probably noticed that the PS4 Pro turns in faster performance than the base system, but there are certain instances where the performance difference is actually reversed and it runs slower on the PS4 Pro.
Digital Foundry って何なんだよ。
This introduction sequence here, for instance. As the camera angle shifts to show more of the world, we see the frame rate really dip pretty hard on the PS4 Pro. It still drops on the regular PS4, of course, but you can see that the gap is pretty large during this scene. It's difficult to say what could be causing this. And we see a similar issue a little while later in this area. The base system manages to hold steady here, but the Pro is dropping a lot of frames. Once we leave behind this introduction mission and jump into the world itself, a new set of problems start to appear. Essentially, what we're seeing are performance drops on both sides, but the most significant issue lies in the frame time spikes. You see these massive drops on the frame time graph manifest as multi-frame stuttering. These hitches can last upwards of 180 milliseconds, which is around 11 frames, and they appear regularly enough during world traversal to be distracting. Thankfully, this specific area filled with grass and trees early on seems to be one of the slowest sections that we encountered in the game, and even many of the larger battles seem to run just fine. Engaging a group of machines in this area here, for instance, we still see occasional drops in performance, but the action actually remains a relatively stable 60 frames per second. The overall sense is that we're looking at a level of performance here not uncommon in Platinum titles. The average frame rate is generally higher than something like Bayonetta 2 on the Wii U, but the real issue remains those massive frame time spikes that appear in the open world areas. Neither version is quite perfect, of course, but in this case, the PS4 Pro generally holds the advantage with a higher average frame rate and much sharper visuals. For those that are looking for more stable performance, however, keep in mind that Nier Automata is also being released for the PC in March. We don't have access to that version yet, but it's likely that it will solve any and all of the issues we've encountered on the PS4 thus far. We'll certainly keep an eye out for it. And so should you. Even with the wobbly performance at parts, this is still a brilliant game with an impeccable sense of style. It feels great to play, is a whole lot of fun, and features a rather compelling narrative, as you'd hope. But that's all we have for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on Twitter. And until next time, this is John, signing off.